Greetings, Kanuga fellows! Hello from very cold New Jersey. It's Trisha Lyons here, and of course, Lisa Kimball. And we are sending you greetings from our ministry farm in New Jersey. We've been thinking about you all and praying for you all. And it's when I'm recording this, it is Tuesday in the second week of Advent. And the faculty who work with you in the Fellows Program have just been wondering, how is everybody? I mean, Advent got started. Many of you who work in and through churches have a lot of things you're doing, a lot of programming. Others of you whose relationship to the church is as someone who worships and serves and offers your gifts, and you're not in charge of like bulletins and stuff. But you can't live in this country anyway and not have this whole season in between Thanksgiving and Christmas feel kind of manic, like whether you're joyful or grieving or both. And most of us are doing both of those things all the time on some level. So whatever it's been, we just wanted to check in and see how you all were. And I wanted to give you a specific group of things to think about. Not many, just a few, because you might ask yourself, well, why are you outside doing that? Well, first, this farm that we have, it's about 150 acres, a little less than that. And there's a couple of dozen acres for fields, so that, things are grown here, corn and pumpkins. And right now the fields are laying fallow, which is lesson number one. If I was filming out where the fields are, you would just see like bramble and randomness and bushes and paths where animals have made their way to eat the seeds and other things left from prior seasons. Animals are always gleaning on a farm. But it's a reminder to us, because when you look out our front porch, there's a 60-foot long front porch that runs across the front of the house that's screened, and you can see out on the crop fields all the time. And it's been such a stark reminder. This is the first time we've only been here about 3 years, and we've never had a season of fallow fields. And to just look out there and see that those fields are producing, to use the capitalist or the consumerist or the materialist phrase, nothing. They're just sitting there. But you know what? They're beautiful. And what's happening is they're resting. And all of the nutrients that come from the combination of the sun and the soil and the water, all that is resting. That field is feeding itself with rest. So that's the first thing I would just ask. And some of you would just roll your eyes and say, like, everybody thinks the Sabbath is a great idea. Everybody thinks resting is a great idea, but who has time for that? Well, the truth is, how much time do we spend on our phones? Apparently, if you take the most recent studies that I've read, the average adult, not teenager, looks at their phone 2,100 times a day. Now, that's for a lot of people, it's their watch and things like that. But they've measured how many glances we do at a phone, and it's over 2,000. So let's just think about that kind of time we're spending just keeping up with on our devices and things like that. But listen to me. There's nothing like looking at a fallow field and realizing it's going to be fallow for an entire year. And then 6 years of productivity will come from this 1 year of just complete rest. And of course, what's beautiful is rest doesn't mean nothing happens. That's just a materialist calculation. Because the truth is, there's a lot happening on that field. Animals are sheltering in it because there's these high grasses now. So we have deer and we have bear and we have other kinds of things, raccoons, you name it, chipmunks everywhere with the chipmunks, mice. So it's actually kind of like a condominium down there. So animals are sheltering in it. So just think, when you rest, not only is it good for you, but who and what gets to shelter in your rest? Another way to say that, what the kids say, it's not all about us. We don't just rest because it lets us do more later. We rest because we celebrate that we're alive, that we can do anything. We do what the Creator did on the seventh day, which is not to decide to do something even better than the day before, but a day to rest and for us to worship the God who brings us every good and perfect gift. So that's thing number one to think about. Thing number two, you're still saying to yourself, couldn't you tell us this story from inside? No, my friends, because that's just a couple of acres we have for fields. Most of this property is a preserved forest with trails like this one. Right now I'm on a ridge, and these are all ash and cedar trees here, and they grow on either side of the path. And what's beautiful is they form a kind of canopy, almost like a cathedral ceiling as you walk down. In the winter, it's just brown bark. That's all you can see. But trust me, this is a place you can think of like taking vows to someone or to something here. There's this one path among many of the old logging trails. We have one building on the property here that's from the late 1790s. But of course, people have been here long before that. But there are lots of trails like this that go deep into the woods. And I wanted to show you this trail. One, because it's beautiful and it has snow on it. This is what we call the Cedar Trail here. But also because I wanted you to know that this trail has always reminded me of Narnia. Now, if you haven't read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, okay, no judgment, but maybe they add that to your to-do list for for Advent or Lent, any time of the year. In fact, there are whole devotionals based on Advent and reading the Chronicles of Narnia, one by an Episcopal priest, actually. So look those up if you're interested. But this is so magical, and it's because of that story. So what I want to say to you today is there are reasons why I think The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I mean, all the Chronicles are wonderful, all 7 books. But there's something about that original story. Lewis had no idea that those stories would be kind of his legacy in the world, of everything else he wrote. Remember, all he wanted to do in life as a young adult was to be a poet, a published poet. And he finally did publish a very long poem he wrote. And the truth is, it wasn't that popular. I mean, it did okay. But he had to accept the fact that the very thing he thought he was going to do for the world was not actually what God had him do for the world. And then he was a medievalist, is what it was called, for those of you that don't know that about Lewis's life. He was a professor of medieval studies. Also not Christianity, per se. Remember, he went into being a professor as an atheist and became good friends with J.R. Tolkien and Owen Barfield and some other wonderful people of great Christian faith who sort of pulled him along, one conversation, one cup of tea, one pipe after another, and sort of pulled Lewis to a place where he was able to ask God to come into his life. And it changed his life. And the professor of medieval studies then became really the most famous professor at the time. People said in England that he was the second most known voice in all of England because he had a radio show, second only behind Churchill. And talking about what? No offense to Lewis, but not medieval studies. What he's talked about on the radio was Christianity, how he went from atheism to Christianity. His favorite fiction book that he wrote, if you didn't know this, was a book that actually not that many people have heard of, even people who really love C.S. Lewis and love Narnia. It's called Till We Have Faces. And it's his retelling of the ancient myth of Cupid and Psyche. So it doesn't mention God or Jesus at all, or sacraments or anything like that. He just retells this famous myth centuries ago, but in a completely Christian way, according really to the way love is discussed in the letter to the Corinthians. So if you're a Christian and you've been well formed or formed at all, you'll read this story that looks like a myth about Cupid and Psyche and things like that, but you'll feel in your bones that love is patient and love is kind and love doesn't boast and love doesn't keep a record of wrongs and love rejoices in the truth. You can feel it. Lewis thought it was going to be his most popular novel. The truth is, very few people know he even wrote it, but that was his favorite. Narnia was not. I mean, he enjoyed the stories, but he had no idea that well after his death, this is still the kind of story that people are telling and buying and making movies about and music about and poetry about. So I wanted to bring you into our woods so you could see if what you see here does for you, maybe what it does for me. It reminds me of Narnia. And why is Narnia such an important thing to think about in Advent? Because remember, when the children who leave London, they actually are from Finchley, which is, I think, north of London, and wind up in Narnia, they find out a couple of things. First of all, it's always winter. And that's what it feels like here. It was 5 degrees today. And with the wind chill right now, that's about what it feels like. So it's freezing, but it's always been freezing for every generation who's alive at that time the children get there, because it's been frozen for 100 years by their wicked witch called the White Witch. So the children realize that there's a place that wasn't always frozen, but it has become that way. And people have really come to accept that that's the reign of this particular witch, and there's nothing they can do about it. Though they do meet a couple of other people, some beavers and people like that tell them the old stories. And they realize there's a couple of species of animals and families of animals that are keeping alive of faith, the stories that Narnia was not always frozen. Think what an act of faith that was, because none of those animals alive had ever seen Narnia not frozen. On 100 years, I mean, I don't know any beavers that live 100 years. So think about that. But what was keeping their faith alive is that they found places to meet together in the cold, frozen woods and share ancient stories. So the truth is, for many different reasons, all of us in our lives feel something is frozen. Some of you might be at a point in your life where you feel a lot of your life is frozen. Relationships you have, your economic situation, your unemployment situation, your employment situation that is kind of freezing your own heart because you don't believe in what you do, or you don't love what you do, or you're not appreciated where you are. Maybe your faith feels frozen. So I love thinking about Narnia and Advent because while the world is twinkling with stars and lights and garland everywhere and candy everywhere and everyone talking about all this joy, Christmas carols, some of you just sort of feel like it's just not what's happening inside you. What's happening inside you feels more like a frozen place that goes on forever and ever. Maybe you've lost someone who means a great deal to you, maybe even in the last year, maybe in the last few months. Maybe you or someone you know is facing a serious health crisis, is facing death. The Narnia stories, they look like they're for children, but it's wonderful that children get a lot out of them. But the older you get, the more you realize they're actually written for us. Where are you frozen? What in you feels like it's been frozen so long, you don't even think much about it being unfrozen again? You have moments where you think maybe parts of it can melt, kind of like resolutions you have in your head about thinking differently or feeling differently. And over time, you may realize that you're not. So, lesson number 1, let fields lay fallow and see what happens. Are you resting in Advent? I know it's hard. I find it to be hard. But remember, you're not just resting for yourself. You're resting to have solidarity with God who rests. Solidarity with other people who are resting. Remember, there are other creatures, other ideas, other ways of being, other prayers that can actually flourish in your rest. So that's number 1. Number 2, think about Narnia. Where are you frozen like this? And again, the reason I brought you here to this part of our farm is I want you to know that if you ever come to visit us, you'll be able to walk on these trails. There's about 80 or 90 acres of woods with just these old logging trails. That's all that there is here. There's really not a lot of the fields that grow crops and things like that. This is primarily a preserved forest with trails in it. And that's why it's perfect for Advent, because we are walking. It's a journey. Every liturgical season is a journey. The truth is, every liturgy is a journny, which is why, we have the Book of Common Prayer that tries to order even very different liturgies in ways that are going to be familiar. So not liturgies it's not that they're the same. It's that in some ways in your soul, they should kind of rhyme. Because we want to be forming ourselves all the time, not just in a different season and a different service every Sunday or sometime during the week, but we both want those services to speak to us about a particular thing that we need to know in our faith or feel. But we also want to have this kind of rhythm of what liturgy is, of what worship is, of what Christian life is. It's about walking on a journey. So I'm just going to take a little walk now because there's one more place that I want you to see and something that I want you to see that will probably surprise you about a preserved forest. I've come a bit down the trail. You just have to walk a little while. And then all of a sudden, there's a little clearing area right here. And then there are trails that go in all different directions from this little clearing. But I wanted to show you something that we have here in our woods, something that has really no business being in a forest. Yes, my friends. We have a lamppost. I have put a lamppost right here at this clearing. Mostly because the stories of the Chronicles of Narnia have fed my faith since I was young. In fact, when I was in college and my father had died and I was a freshman, the very first night I was back at college, someone actually read me a portion of the Narnia Chronicles from the book, the third book, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader. And it was about a boy who had become a dragon. He was very skeptical, very doubtful. He was just going through a lot of things. But he winds up turning into a dragon and then wants to turn back. First, he wants all the money of the dragon and the gold and this big cave the dragon lives in. But then he feels alone and sad and he wants to become a boy again. And he meets Aslan, and it's a wonderful story. So go read it about how Aslan helps him take off his scales. And in a phrase that is so C.S. Lewis, the first time that Eustace is his name, is seen by one of the other children, Edmund, he's a boy again. And he says to Edmund, who knows Aslan and who knows how Narnia works, and that this is just the kind of thing that happens in Narnia, he says to Edmund, I don't really know what happened to me. And Edmund says, I think you've met Aslan. And then he says to him, and you've been undragoned. What a great phrase for baptism, right? For faith, for prayer, to be undragoned. The scales that somehow have come upon us that we think they're armor. But remember, at the prayer that begins in Advent, cast away the works of darkness and put on the full armor of light. We're not meant to put armor on ourselves to keep ourselves from being hurt. It's the other way around. Jesus says, feel your life, feel the pain of the world, feel the joy of the world. I want you to feel it all and not try to protect yourself. So let me take away from you the thing that keeps many people from living fully, the fear of death. I will destroy death. Not so that you can put some armor on yourself to keep yourself from getting hurt, keep yourself from dying. That's going to happen. It happens to me, says Jesus. But I change it because I take on death. I then share resurrection with you because I became a human and changed what happens to a human when they die, which is that they rise in glory. We then get to share that destiny of the human person. Jesus Christ, the fully human person, fully God, fully human. So whatever Jesus does in the human body is now possible. In fact, it's God's destiny for all human beings and human bodies. Incredible, right? Anyway, so here at our farm, I have this lamppost out here in the middle of a clearing, and then it trails off to different ways throughout the property. But it's a reminder of what C.S. Lewis wanted us to remember, that we are entering if we dare to follow where Christ leads us, not go where we think God wants us to go, which is an unprayerful but sort of disciplined obedience, which is I will live the life God wants me to lead. And you're just turning into some kind of religious authority from the first century, who those people never really do well in the Bible stories, people. What we're meant to do is follow the one who says, come and see, taste and see. Zacchaeus, come out of the tree. Woman at the well, drink my water. Woman bleeding in the crowd, come to me. Let the children come to me. Let everyone come to me. And I will give you rest. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. We're called to be followers of Jesus, to enjoy, even in the wake of his time on earth, the grace that comes. We're not supposed to be workers, dutifully showing up, keeping track of other people, letting love keep a record of wrongs of everyone around us. They're not as good as we are. They're not as Christian as we are. No, the whole thing is an invitation. Don't turn Christianity into a science of the legal and the illegal or the good and the wrong. No, we're called into this passionate relationship. And that's why C.S. Lewis creates Narnia, because he feels like that message that this is a relationship with God of joy, that your resurrection begins at the font when you're baptized, not when you die. That we begin our new life in Christ when we're sealed as Christ's own forever, and then the Holy Spirit is in our lives. But you know what? God decides in that moment not to just put delete on our free will. It's up to us. Even though we're marked as Christ's own forever, do we want to walk with him every day? Lewis says this is a message that's hard for people. So he decides to create a world that's very different. And if people can enter it through their imagination, somewhere like Narnia, and in Narnia, they can see very explicitly, good and evil, who are the people who are faithful to Aslan, who is the creator and lover of all things, and the one who gives his life for someone else that they might live and be free, so that all people might live and be free, so that all creation might live and be free. Lewis believed if he could kind of put it into a story like a Trojan horse, you would love these ideas. Who was against that? Who reads these stories and says Aslan is a jerk? In fact, who reads these stories and says that it's ever a better idea to do something besides follow Aslan? It's never a better idea to do something besides follow Aslan. And then the children at the end of the story go back to their world in North London, in Finchley. They go back, and the idea is because they were in a place like Narnia that was so different, for example, that there would be a lamppost in the middle of the woods. Something about it was so different that they forgot all their frustrations with religion, world religions, Christian practices that no one really explained to them, that he could put us somewhere, if we read these stories, where we would fall in love with how the world, the real world, actually works, that there is a creator, that there is an incarnation. Remember, Narnia is always winter, never Christmas. Again, a perfect reason to think about Narnia and Advent. We're all waiting for Christmas. And in those stories, they've been waiting for 100 years. But the truth is, I don't think any of us are waiting for the credit card bills or the messy kitchen with the piles of plates and all the different things that you do to try to survive emotionally in Advent, to meet the expectations of American culture that this is the happiest time of the year and you're supposed to feel so happy. It's exhausting to feel things, but it's more exhausting to feel things that you don't really feel. So my friends, think of this lamppost. Remember where the lamppost comes from in Narnia, that thousands of years ago, you read about sort of the deep history of Narnia. The White Witch, it leaves London and she winds up breaking off a piece of a lamppost in London, just a little piece of metal. And eventually she winds up in Narnia in a kind of fight with Aslan. And she has this piece of metal and she just throws it at him. Remember? And it just kind of bonks off his nose. She's just so angry at him. She just casts it out. But what happens is that little piece of the lamppost falls into the snow of Narnia. And what happens over time is that little piece grows up into a lamppost that is lit all the time, just like this one is actually. This one is solar. It's always light. But the message is that everything in Narnia grows, even though there's winter, a long winter. That even that piece of metal, as soon as it hit the earth of Narnia, it began to grow and it grew into a light. That the Wicked Witch thought that she was, both hurting Aslan when she threw it at him, but definitely she was just taking a piece of trash, a little piece of scrap metal, threw it down. But look, even in frozen Narnia, Aslan is still on the move. Aslan is still the creator who can renew all things. So look what happened to a little piece of metal in the Narnia stories. So literally, like the first scene of the kids in Narnia sets the message. Everything grows in Narnia. Don't be fooled by the winter. Father Christmas will come. Christmas will come. And there are certain animals in the woods who've always known this. Their parents told them the stories. Their grandparents told them the stories. They're telling their kids the stories. And they look around, especially the culture that we have right now. In my lifetime, as a white person, I'll be honest, I have not seen this country so cold, so frozen, and so divided as it is now. But I know the incredible privilege. There are people, whether it's immigrants, people of color, different kinds of minorities of any kind and of every kind, neurodivergence, just name it. There are people who have been freezing in our culture for a long time. But now there's just a lot more of us who feel frozen in this culture. But imagine if we can enter this Advent and keep in front of us this Advent, this truth. Everything grows in Narnia. Nothing can stop what Aslan starts. That's what the lamppost is about. Think of that in your own life. Nothing can stop what Christ has started. You may say to yourself, I was deeply curious about who Jesus is and deeply curious about the scriptures when I was in college, and ever since then it's been kind of like work and relationships and money and trying to be a good person and, thinking about God when I can and tithing when I can or whatever. But you feel like there was this kind of honeymoon with God and you've lost it. My friends, hear the invitation right now. Taste and see. Come and see. Come follow me. The best years of your spiritual life don't have to be behind you. You could have the most epic Advent you have ever had. We know that that's what God wants. Jesus who gets on the cross for us. Jesus who faces death, who saw equality with God, according to Philippians, not something to be grabbed at, but instead emptied himself and took on the life of a servant. Those who walked in darkness have seen a great light, not because we turned the light on. We've seen a great light because the light comes to us. Christ is coming to you. Christ is coming to me and asking the same thing Christ has asked every human we have from the scriptures that we can remember. He simply says, come, lose your life, and in me you will find it. My friends, I know you're cold. I'm cold too. In fact, right now, I'm actually freezing right now. But it's okay. It's a reminder and it's solidarity with how many people and how many places across this world things are ice. They're not thinking about potential. They're not thinking about joy. And they're not singing Christmas carols. They could be in prison. They could be in a famine. They could be being tortured. They could be prisoners in this country. They could be in a detention center. They could be in an oncology office. My friends, in all the places where you're cold, don't wait for that cold to pass. Some season somewhere in the future where you want to be closer with God. How about right now? How about now, when you're cold, when it is cold? Look at the signs in your life of the lampposts, the signs that say, in God's world, everything can grow, always. Peace be with you, my friends.